Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. It is a great honor to be able to speak about His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and perhaps you know, but if you don't, I'll tell you, he and I had a very unique, very special relationship amongst his god brothers. And while there are many complexities to Maharaj's pastimes and leelas and so on within iskcon and Srila Prabhupada, I think I am a little qualified to clear up any misconceptions. So, to clear up the first misconception, I have to give you a tiny history. We started mass book distribution at the end of 1972, before most of you were born. And all throughout 1973, Srila Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were somehow enabling the book distributors to feel a level of transcendental bliss that was almost indescribable, definitely contagious, infectious, irrepressible, and the whole movement had heard about this. One discovery after another, the secrets of how to distribute books, donating our best book distributors to teach others. I mean, it was a unique time of complete selfless purity in book distribution. Now, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was doing transcendental service in India. Srila Prabhupada had assigned him great responsibilities in India, in the management, which is very complicated, getting our movement started in India. And suddenly, in 1974, Tamal Krishna Maharaj just left India and came back to America. Sometimes if you read letters, from Prabhupada, how he felt about this initially, this is the first confusion I want to clear up. I'm only able to speak in English, is that okay? Tamal Krishna Maharaj was not abandoning his duties as some might have seen it in that way. No. There's a whole different vision of what happened. From America to India is so many thousand, tens of thousands, 10,000 miles, whatever it is. Somehow or other, that Sankirtan energy, that Sankirtan fever and bliss was calling to him. He couldn't help himself. He had to come to America. And that's why he left India. So any other explanation, oh, he gave up service or something like that, no. He was drawn by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada and their book distributors. He was drawn to that, and he could not help himself. So I want you to understand this. In case you ever hear any other explanation of him leaving India, this is the transcendental explanation. This is the spiritual explanation. just give you a quick history of, let's see, where did I put that piece of paper? So you'll understand my relationship with Goswami Maharaj. Just before he left India, Vishnu Jan Swami had applied to Srila Prabhupada for a BBT loan to buy a bus for Shishi Radha Damodar and the devotees that were so fortunate to live with Vishnu Jan Maharaj as he was putting on festivals in college campuses in America. So that first loan, that first bus came in December of 1973. Now, let me show you what happened when Tamal Krishna Maharaj joined Vishnu Jan Maharaj. The second bus came in September of 1974. At this point, Srila Prabhupada had told me that I had some discretion in giving BBT loans, and whenever the combination of Tamal Maharaj, Vishnu Jan Maharaj wanted a traveling temple, I was authorized to give them the money. So my relationship with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, apart from the competition, was to be his servant and facilitate his service. So the second bus came in September 1974. Third bus, and each bus is filled up with devotees. Third bus came in October 1974. Fourth bus came when my closest godbrother, Tripurari, who had just taken sannyas, Tripurari Swami, we had given him a bus to travel and teach temples. So fourth bus came when Tripurari was so attracted to what Tamal Krishna Maharaj was doing that he had to join him. Tripurari and I were so close, nothing could separate us. Somehow, Tamal Krishna Maharaj separated us. And he joined him, and that was the fourth bus. Then, in August of 1975, came the fifth bus, the sixth bus. In December of 1975, when I add Tripurari's bus, let me start again. Vishnu Jan 1, Tamal Krishna Maharaj 2 in September, Tamal Krishna Maharaj 3 in September, Tripurari Maharaj joins them in beginning of 75, that's 4. August 75, 5th bus, 6th bus. Then December 75, 7th bus, 8th bus, 9th bus. Oh, I can't read my own handwriting. August 75, 5th bus, 6th bus, 7th bus, 8th bus. That's how fast it was expanding with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Then December 75, 9th bus and 10th bus. And finally, July of 76, 11th bus. So I just wanted to give you a perspective how, when he came drawn to America for book distribution, these buses were filling up with book distributors, and he was training them. And then Tripurari helped him in training them. Up to 11 buses filled with devotee book distributors at one time. And this he came out in September 74, he joined Vishnu Jan. So from 74 to 76 in 2 years, 10 more buses. This is extraordinary. I mean, this is just so you can try to imagine his attractive feature for book distribution, getting devotees to want to be trained by him and serve under him for book distribution. So before he came, 1973, we were doubling book distribution. All that year was the explosion year. Then when he comes to America, every single year it doubles again and then doubles again. He and I would discuss, because he was doing so many books, we would discuss what books he wanted from the BBT, what volume, what quantities, and so on. So in addition to supplying him the buses, he and I became transcendental partners in which books to print the most. And we had changed Back to Godhead magazine from strictly commenting on Bhagavad stories and so on into, we had asked Prabhupada's permission to do this. Could we have articles in Back to Godhead magazine that are more oriented towards current events of the time in the world and giving a Krishna conscious perspective on those events? Prabhupada said, that is the most difficult of all types of writing. And we said, well, Srila Prabhupada, we know you did that with Back to Godhead in India. We would like your blessing to try. And he said, okay, you can try. Once that happened, Tamal Krishna Maharaj thought, this is the backbone of the Hare Krishna movement. So what happened in 1974, by his Sankirtan parties, they were ordering 250,000 magazines a month. A month. The beginning of 1975, 500,000 Back to Godhead magazines a month, in addition to all the other books. There's never been distribution like this in the history of our movement. And then, I think it was August of 1975, 1 million Back to Godhead magazines each month because of the Radha Damodar party. So this is what he accomplished, and this lowly servant was his partner. So I thought the most intense spiritual relationship with a devotee I would ever have was the relationship I had with Tripurari Maharaj. But I have to say, looking back after all these years, in a different way, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I developed the most intense relationship. We were suited for each other because I was very intense and he was very intense. So these two brothers, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and little Ramaswar, the intensity that we both had was like we were exploding inside. What he was feeling and what I was feeling. I have never felt this. This is the first time I came to visit his samadhi. The second I saw it, I started feeling exactly what we were feeling back in 1975 when we were together. He is absolutely present there. Don't anyone doubt that. Because I'm not his disciple, I'm his brother. And I couldn't compose myself. I was so affected by just seeing his samadhi and feeling his presence. So, as you may know, 1975, Srila Prabhupada started expanding my service. brought the press to New Dwarka. And then he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Vishnu John Maharaj, Brahmananda Swami, I'm just trying to think now, Kirtananda Swami, Satsarup Maharaj, Rupanuga was a Swami at the time, Dayananda. He had called all these great sannyasis to a morning walk in Los Angeles on Venice Beach on June 21, 1975, because he wanted all of them there when he confronted me. Why are you 17 books behind? Prabhupada had just given me the service of managing iskcon Press, so in my stupid ego I thought it's not my fault. But Prabhupada said, it is your fault. And in fact, his secretary in Hawaii, a week before he came, called me up to say, Srila Prabhupada is very angry at you. And I'm telling you this because Tamal Krishna Maharaj saw at different times when Srila Prabhupada was very angry at me, and how much I responded, and how much I enjoyed the personal touch of Prabhupada when he was angry at me and pushing me to do something that I thought was impossible. So that day on Venice Beach, when all the sannyasis were staring at me as Prabhupada gave the order to print the 17 books in 2 months, I looked up at all these leaders of our movement, all these sannyasis, and all of them had a certain look except for Tamal Krishna Maharaj. They were all looking at me like, aha, now what are you going to do? Or, aha, I'm glad it's not me. But Tamal Krishna Maharaj was looking at me, and I could see the love and compassion in his eyes. Please do this for Prabhupada. He was the only one who was looking at me, wishing for me to accomplish this. He has always been my well-wisher because he saw that how Prabhupada was dealing with me. I'm not going to say that yelling at devotees is something that, let me say it differently. He was there at different times when Prabhupada lovingly yelled at me and smashed me, and he saw the effect, how it pushed me to a height that I had never thought I could reach, and how I love that. And to this day, if someone asks what do I miss about Prabhupada, the first thing I'm going to say is his beating me as my guru. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj observed how Prabhupada treated me like that. The only other devotee that I know that Prabhupada treated like that was Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So we share that in common. Prabhupada, in sometimes being so angry, like Lord Nrsingadev, at us, to push us to levels that we never knew could exist, and we certainly didn't think were in us. So we share that, he and I share that in common. It's in so many ways that brought us so close. The intensity of Prabhupada's dealings, our natural intensities, my helping supply him books, him watching the books come out, us partnering in what books we wanted to distribute. But then came another misconception I want to clear up. Many devotees in our movement thought that Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I didn't like each other because of the competition. That is the most mundane understanding of transcendental competition that Prabhupada introduced. He taught that in the spiritual world is the pure origin of competition. Down here is the perverted reflection, and especially now, the demonic reflection, competition. But in the spiritual world, there is the most glorious, ecstatic blissful, original competition that is just reflected down here, where everyone is competing to give pleasure to Krishna or Radha. And they're pushing each other with such infinite energy and an infinite intensity. And they're so joyful when someone can give Krishna more pleasure or give Radha more pleasure. So anyone who thinks that our history, my history with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, was we were competitors, so we were just angry at each other, didn't like each other, and so on. Nothing could be further from the truth. The book distribution that I was organizing and the book distribution that he was organizing, he loved the book distribution I was organizing. I loved the book distribution he was organizing. And because I was the BBT trustee, this was bringing in so much Lakshmi and distributing so many books, we were both so ecstatic in this competition. Now I know you know that famous letter where Prabhupada said, oh, if the Grahastha zone defeats the sannyasi 11 buses, Tamal will have heart failure. Very famous letter. That is a spiritual nectarine pushing of Tamal Krishna Maharaj to reach a higher level than he ever thought he could reach. That's not a mundane comment. So what he brought in doubling book distribution year after year after year, it made us as close as brothers could ever be. So now I want to tell you the final pastime that I wanted to share with you. There's two parts to this. The first part is when we had to face the unthinkable, a universe without Prabhupada present physically, an earth without Prabhupada walking on it. When we were called, all of us, to India in April of 1977, all the GBC had to force our minds to go beyond, no, this can't happen, Prabhupada, we're praying that it never happens, to think of questions about what happens afterwards. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I were together when Prabhupada was dictating his last will to the movement. And we were thinking up the questions together, he and I, to ask Srila Prabhupada about how things can go on in his absence. So, what you feel, many of you in this room, as his disciples, you can just imagine what we were feeling. The fear of Prabhupada leaving, the overwhelming calamity that we thought would happen, Prabhupada leaving, and so on. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj knew how affected I was by this. Because working after the marathon, we made a promise to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, we will never again fall behind your pace of translating. If you translate a book, we will have it out in 1 month. Never mind this 3 books a year. And that's what happened. We kept our promise. After the marathon, all the 6 canto volumes, every month, 1 a month, all the 7th canto volumes, every month another book, all the 8th canto volumes. We never stopped our marathon. We lived in that state of non-stop. So just imagine, 9th canto, every month another volume, and starting with the 10th canto. So try to imagine, that's everyone at the press, this was our existence. We didn't have any existence outside of doing this. Tamal Krishna Maharaj knew how infinitely attached and dedicated we were. And so he was very afraid for me after Prabhupada left, that everything at the press, Prabhupada's gone. It's like a black hole has enveloped the whole universe, and we were sucked into this darkness. I'm telling you this story because I want you to understand how loving he is to the person who had the biggest competition in the world with him, me. He called me up right after Srila Prabhupada's departure because he was worried about me. He spent 20 minutes on the phone with me from India, calming me down and telling me how to deal with it and how to go on for Prabhupada. So that's a side of Tamal Krishna Maharaj that many of you may not have experienced. I got to experience it firsthand, how in the most intense competition in our lifetimes, he could show such compassion and love for his chief competitor. This is the proof of his spiritual dimension, that he's completely on the spiritual platform. And I'm so indebted to him. It's like the most intense part of my relationship with Prabhupada, maybe his, but definitely mine, is because of each other. So I am his eternal servant, and I thank you, Maharaj.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Purle Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunnivari Paschatade Shatanine. Tamal Krishna Maharaj Ki Jai.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol. I thought to begin with a word of thanks for the gift that all of us are right now enjoying, because it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj who purchased the first plot of land here in Mayapur. And that was not easy. That was not easy. Maharaj always went for the challenges. So this is a time to reflect, at least for me and all of us, I suppose. We reflect on our association and our experience, but we also reflect on the lessons and the inspiration that we've received from a great soul. My personal experience with Tamal Krishna Maharaj began when he had come from India and joined the Radha Damodar party with his old and dear friend Vishnu John Maharaj. At the time I was in New York. New York is my, how would you say this? I mean, I have a great attachment to New York, and I continue, I've revived that. Anyway, we'll get to that. But we'd heard about Maharaj's success in recruiting devotees. And so I was deputed to learn, to see, to observe what was he doing. And I recall first arriving he was in Boston at the time, or actually, yeah, Boston Temple, but I went to Harvard Square where they were set up, Vishnujan, and they were set up in such attractive kirtan. It's just, I mean, this was Vishnujan's specialty. He just mesmerized us with his kirtan, with the, I think that is, what is it called, a saranga, the stringed and, you know, it's played with a bow, and the saraj, esraj, yes, that's what it was, esraj, and the tambura, and the just extraordinarily beautiful kirtan, and people were, of course, attracted. So that was Vishnujan. But I was particularly interested, okay, now, what's his tamal doing? So I went to the Sunday feast where, you know, those, and still, I mean, what is our Sunday feast formula around the world is that we invite people for kirtan and prasadam, and then we sit down with our guests and we talk. And we try to answer their questions and try to bring them forward and maybe elicit a positive response and, you know, get them moving closer to Krishna. So Maharaj had a technique that I observed, and I think probably was told about it beforehand, and I observed it firsthand, and I actually tried it myself. But he had I guess in sales, there's always this get them to yes principle, right? That you have to move a person to yes. So you do that by asking questions where the response will be a natural yes. So, you know, like he would start explaining our philosophy and say, so does that make sense to you? And the people say, yes, that makes sense, yes. And then the next point, how does that sound? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And in this way he would gradually build up, point by point, you know, you're not your body, the purpose of life, the futility of sense enjoyment, and he would very analytically develop someone's interest in our philosophy, and then he would come in with the closer. And the closer went something like this. So, you've agreed with everything I say. Now, if you're honest, you're going to join us. And what do you say to that? and a lot of you, especially young college kids who were, you know, open, they said, yes. and there it was. There's the bus. It's right outside. Next morning, we're going. And in that way, Maharaj was picking up devotees. So I tried it myself. It didn't work. I didn't have that power. They said, nah, yeah, I'm honest, and I'm honestly not going with you. You know? I'm not going to do all that. Anyhow, so that was my first interaction, observation, I should say, of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And it wasn't until some years later, after we moved into West 55th Street in New York, that I had a little more extended time. By this time, Maharaj had developed the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party to extraordinary heights, and along with it a bit of a reputation. Actually, I should say 55th Street was not the next time. He also visited Henry Street. And some of the places that he would visit, the temples would experience a little overnight transformation. That the day before they had 10 brahmacharis, and the next morning before Mangal Arati, they find that they've got 5. 5 of their brahmacharis had gotten on the bus, and the bus was gone. So there's a little bit of a tension going on at that time. But somehow we didn't have that type of experience. We went into a negotiation mode. I remember that Tamal, Krishna Maharaj and myself, I was managing the New York temple. We would negotiate. Okay, you have somebody who's not, needs to take a break from the bus. I've got somebody who would like to get on the bus. So we traded, and those were the days of trading. Ramashar, you remember the trading? Yes.
My negotiation with him is I let him go anywhere in the California, Northwest, anywhere, airport, you name it, as long as he doesn't take one devotee from the temple. That was my negotiation.
Yes.
And he agreed.
Yeah, no, he was very, very reasonable. All right, for the record, for the recording.
I was very sensitive about temples losing devotees. And now I was in charge of this western zone with Jayatirtha, and we were in this super competition with Radha Damodar.
Yeah.
So his buses they want to come through, and I wanted to make sure we did not lose one devotee. So we met with him. I met with him and said, here's what I would agree to. You can go anywhere, enliven the temples, go to any airport you want. These are the biggest places in North America for distributing. You have full access if you promise not to take one devotee from the temple. And for the sake of book distribution competition, he agreed.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Rameshwar Prabhu was talking about competition in our movement. And recently there's been a lot of we always should, and Prabhupada talked about this too. He said we should come here to Mayapur to discuss unity and diversity. And I believe that this is an emblem. This is the way in which the temples, the devotees, especially during Srila Prabhupada's time, and continuing today, just like Mayapur, Delhi, is a good example of how fierce competition. Who will come number one? Let's go. And yet, complete unity, complete feeling of full respect, no underhandedness or anything like that. Just, we're there to serve, we're competing simply for one purpose, one unified purpose, to serve His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada and Lord Gouranga's mission. So this spirit of competition that Srila Prabhupada brought, of this transcendental competition, was the emblem of how to achieve unity in diversity. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj exemplified that. He understood it. He may have fine-tuned it to a certain extent and maybe pushed the envelope a little bit strong in some places, to the point where some were saying, this is not unity. Anyway, but in the end, he always was ready to surrender in every case. So that in India, we had a bit more occasion to, well, actually so he and I, we would meet here in India. I moved to India in 1976, and from that point, various services, not a lot of association, but I do remember him coming. He was of course, very close to Bhakti True Maharaj. So he would come, and we shared space in a office in Calcutta. And my main recollections from there I got to appreciate Tamal Krishna Maharaj's love for prasadam, but very specific love. He knew what he liked, and he knew how he liked it, and he said, that's the way to do it. And it was perfect, because we also enjoyed. We enjoyed his enjoyment, and we enjoyed his particularness about honoring prasadam in appropriate ways. here and there. I didn't really get into a more personal relationship with Tamal Krishna Maharaj until I ended up in Dallas, Texas for a few years. And there, of course, when he would come, he would invite us to share prasadam with him at that time too. And there I got to know a little bit more of his personality, his friendliness, his humor. He could be very funny. He knew how to find the humor in different things. And his warmth. I was fortunate, I suppose, I never worked under Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He was never my authority in some ways. And I've heard from others who did have him as their authority that could be quite a lesson in learning humility and tolerance. But with us, it was generally just always friendly. He would call a spade when it had to be, but it was very friendly and humorous and loving, and I really appreciated that. When we came back to India, then by that time, he had moved ahead into his academic career. I think around that time, things were different. And let me step back. I think I got to interact with him on a few occasions when he was in some spaces with the GBC and devotees over various things. Anyway, I had this to experience a person who, despite his depth of intelligence, his ability, his strength, and his power in management and in leadership, was at heart so humble. And I observed that. So when I come before our departed God brothers and God sisters, and I generally come with some prayer. I come with a prayer to be blessed with the gifts that they demonstrated. In the case of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, the first gift that I pray for, which I believe he demonstrated so much in abundance, was intelligence in the service of Krishna. I need that. I'm tasked with a variety of services that basically are designed to somehow keep my overactive mind engaged. And the way to engage an overactive mind is to place it under spiritual intelligence. And for me at least, I observed on so many different occasions his superlative spiritual intelligence. I also pray for the kind of heart-deep love for Srila Prabhupada that he exhibited. Now I mean heart deep because he, unlike most of us, especially myself, Rameshwar Prabhu has perhaps more, but he was one of those that got about as close to Srila Prabhupada as you could get. from my perspective, I was always sort of on the periphery, and my Srila Prabhupada was less intimate. With Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada felt so comfortable and trusting that he could engage with him on an intimate level that would challenge all of us who try to see our spiritual master with awe and reverence. But Srila Prabhupada wanted Tamal Krishna to be not just his disciple, but his friend. He exhorted Tamal Krishna Maharaj to engage with him as a friend would engage. Sometimes he might have to limit that because you could go too far, but still he would engage him in argument. He would allow him to argue, to put forth his positions. I heard from my godbrother who was also not also, I was not very close with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, but he was very close with him. And he described how during his academic time that Tamal Krishna Maharaj, this was my friend's words, and I can't, not Tamal's words, but that he deconstructed Tamal Krishna Maharaj's inspiration that kirtan is so fundamental. He invited his friends at first to have kirtan in his quarters. Word got around, people started coming, started filling up, and I think eventually they had to move it down into the temple room. And I was fortunate to be in those kirtans and to experience the kirtan of these great souls together. And that exchange, again, that loving exchange on the platform of Krishna consciousness. But then I also had a very significant interaction that supports my contention of Tamal Krishna Maharaj's intelligence. He was also attending now for the first time in many years a meeting of the Sri Mayapur Project Development Committee. And Abhiram Prabhu had taken over as the managing director of the SMPDC, had been working on the designs and so on. And there were certain aspects that were difficult. The GBC had earlier requested, and I'm going on and I will finish now, had requested that the temple should last for 10,000 years. And it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj who in conversation with Abhiram Prabhu, he suggested that, well, there's different ways to interpret that. One way is that the materials last for 10,000 years, and the other is that the building is built in such a way that it can be maintained for 10,000 years. And this just was like a light bulb of inspiration, which then translated into a design approach that involves structural steel that could then be taken out and put back and so on. And another stroke of intelligence, I believe, it was introduced, he looked around the room in the SMPDC, he said, how are we going to do this incredible project? We have no experience, but we have friends in business and industry. Let's invite them, which I also felt was really the kind of genius and intelligence that he brought to the table. Unfortunately, he left us before those visions could be really accelerated. But it is now happening, and I thank him for that. So I'm sorry for taking so much time. No, anyway, I'll add one more if you, because Maharaj did have a reputation of being, and a deserved reputation, I should say, of being super sannyasi path, brahmachari sannyas, that's the way. And in fact, he led, or at least was the strong force behind an attempt in 1976 to restructure the temple management in such a way that the grihastas had to live separately and the brahmacharis would be in charge of all the temples and so on, which resulted in many things. There was a reverse when the temple presidents arrived. They mounted a counter, and ultimately there's the story of Prabhupada's request to Tamal Krishna Maharaj to go to China. Anyway, it's a whole other thing that is little. Yes, Rameshwar Prabhu. Give him the microphone.
Srila Prabhupada at the Mayapur festival, February 76, he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj and myself into his quarters. And he sat back as we debated. Prabhupada loved these mock debates, but this was a very serious debate. He asked Tamal Krishna Maharaj to explain what happens that there's a complaint that brahmacharis are leaving their temples and joining him. Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave the most brilliant explanation to Prabhupada. It was so brilliant that Prabhupada, if someone comes to me for help, am I supposed to say no? Am I supposed to tell him, no, just stay where you are? He's begging to come with me, and I can train him in a different way than he's been trained. Prabhupada loved that argument. He really did. Until I spoke, the other side, which I'm not going to explain, because this is all about Tamal and his intelligence. But at the end of it, Prabhupada looked at both of us and just said, both sides had great merit. And he said, so what is to be done? And that's when the temple presidents came and tipped the scale. But
yes.
I just wanted to share with you the intimacy that we had with Prabhupada, that we could debate these things just privately in his quarters. And Prabhupada loved hearing different perspectives and angles of how to establish this Krishna consciousness movement.
Yes.
And Tamal and I really respected each other for being able to see the jewel from different angles of vision. Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj ki jai.
Jai, jai. Yeah, he was not, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was not constrained by, having to think in this way or that way. He only had a goal, he had the goal in mind, and he was ready to explore and to discover. His attitudes towards the Grihastha ashram, I believe, did evolve.
After he was defeated by the Grihastha.
He began to appreciate. By the time this incident, I remember in Murwillumbah, somehow I was in, because my wife is from Australia. So somehow or other we were at New Govardhan. And I don't think we knew at the time that Tamal would be there, but he had just arrived. And I remember him in a Ishtagoshti with the Grihastas, because by that time, of course, our movement had transformed somewhat into dominated by Grihastas. And his words were so affectionate. He was just telling them, you have to love each other. You have to, affection and love is part of this service. Don't think, don't just keep your brahmachari mood in the grihastha ashram. You'll just a recipe for disaster. You have to learn to love and be affectionate and serve each other. And he spoke with such warmth. It was really touching. And so I saw that, what the old mood of brahmachari forever, dark well, the whole, don't get patagriyat, the kind of language that was sort of common in the 75, 76 days of Radha Damodar party had gone. And now it was, he had grown to really appreciate the role of grihastha ashram and to advise and to encourage in the right way, to put love of Krishna, love of each other as servants of Krishna in the center of our relationships. So, thank you very much. I've been asked to give a talk online at 12 o'clock, so I'm going to take your leave, although I would like to stay. So, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Thank you very much, Mahaprabhuji.
Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshush Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Samadhi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavani Bhacharani Nirvishesha Shandavari Prasthata Deshtani. The greatest fortune of my life was that Srila Prabhupada went to Melbourne, Australia and installed Gaurnitai. And after installing Gaurnitai, he sat on the Vyasasana and said, the people of Melbourne have become fortunate because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared here. So I am one of those fortunate people. The next greatest fortune of my life was that Tamal Krishna Goswami, he decided to spend time in Australia and New Zealand, and I was able to meet him, associate with him, and develop a relationship with him, which had such an effect on my life. I thank Rameshwar Prabhu for attending today and sharing with us his heartfelt realizations, and again allowing us to experience that mood of Sankirtan in the 1970s with Srila Prabhupada and his extraordinary servants who are like the stars accompanying the moon of the Sankirtan revolution on this planet. Such extraordinary persons to be able to associate with Prabhupada so closely and have such intimacy with him. I never met Prabhupada, but I was able to meet Tamal Krishna Goswami and understand something about Prabhupada as a result of associating with him. The mood in the mid-1980s when I joined, the mood of our movement was Tamal Krishna Maharaj's mood. He was leading the movement in Sankirtan. The standard issue for us studying, at that time there was no internet, no YouTube, no so many publications and desktop publishing. There was only a few books. There was Prabhupada's books, there was Lila Amrita, and there was Servant of the Servant. The Servant of the Servant was standard issue for all the Sankirtan devotees in the 1980s. In fact, in retrospect, I feel that in future generations, Servant of the Servant should be a standard curriculum of study for anyone desiring to take initiation in iskcon. Because by studying that book, you can understand the meaning of Guru-Shishya relationship. He came to this world to serve Prabhupada and show all humanity what it means to be a disciple. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki. There's so many things we could say. I reflect on that moment on the Tirubhav, and all Mayapur stopped. I'd never seen such a thing. For 3 days, we were with Janmashtami Prabhu. At that time there was such a thing called Gopurnima seminars. And Jamashtami Prabhu would arrange, he would have 30 or 40 seminars going on, all over the different Mayapur. This is in the 2000, around 2001, a year. So then Goswami Maharaj just suddenly left. It was shocking. It was such a shock. His samadhi is the first samadhi here. And he said that my samadhi will be the first. It was a shock to the movement. None of our leaders, he just left. He was going to Vrindavan, he just left. Today is Tirubhav. We're remembering that event. And then everything stopped in Mayapur. I never saw it before, I've never seen it again. That it had such an impact on the whole of the world, and Mayapur, everything stopped. All of our seminars, everything stopped. Nothing was going on in Mayapur from this day. I'll tell you about Parikrama but a little shortly, but everything stopped, and for 3 days, non-stop, all of the movement's leaders, everybody came together all day in the temple, and we just churned and discussed the glories of Tamal Krishna Goswami. It went for 3 days. After that evening when we put his Gurudev in the Samadhi. Now so many, he was such an influential person. After Prabhupada left the whole movement, there's so many, we took shelter of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, and we could feel Prabhupada's presence in his association. I remember Navadip Mandal Parikrama. There's so many aspects of our movement that were personally established by Srila Gurudev. I mean, what to speak of the previous decade, the Sankirtan, everything about Sankirtan. And it's such a, I thank you so much, Rama Prabhu, for coming, and the brother, these two brothers, and sharing with us these intimate realizations about the Sankirtan movement. That we came to the movement at that time in mid-80s in the Sankirtan spirit. So the Sankirtan movement, the style of some book distribution, magazine distribution, street distribution, Harinam Sankirtan, all of these things, directly inspiration of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj and his contribution to this movement. So many other things. Kirtan Mela. Kirtan Mela grew out of the kirtans Tamal Krishna Maharaj was having in his room. That last year, he was having the kirtans, the word was going around. It was like the buzz that he heard about Goswami Maharaj's kirtans. You heard about it. Everyone, you couldn't get into the room. It became more, and then they decided, okay, let's move down to the temple. Shivaram Maharaj, Niranjan Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they moved down into the temple. That was the beginning of Kirtan Mela. We never had such an event where, it was the beginning of Kirtan Mela. We never had an event where we would sit down on the ground, harmonium, and chant Hare Krishna. It never happened before in the movement. It had become an established anga, bhakti anga of our movement from the inspiration of the heart of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. What about Navadip Mandal Parikrama? I remember hearing the announcement, perhaps it was in perhaps 1988, 1989. Oh, the Navadip Mandal Parikrama devotees are arriving back from the Parikrama. We can go and greet them. We went, maybe 15, 20 devotees. And then Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, so many things we could say, so many histories there, but he began to become interested in Navadip Mandal Parikrama. And as he was traveling the world, he was inducing, I use the word inducing. You had no choice. You had to come to Navadip Mandal Parikrama. You had to bring your tent. He had a whole entourage. He had his whole team. He had a cook. What was his name? Gopal Raj. He had a cook. He had Jai-ho. And they would travel. They would set up Goswami Maharaj's camp. I still remember in Nishingapalli where he was out in the jungle there. And he's doing it. He's expecting everyone else to do it. You have no choice. All the GBCs have to have your own tent. We were there trying to set up tents. And then I remember those visions as we were walking on the paths of Navadip Dham with the coconut trees and the wind, and as it warms up this time, it's just beginning to get warmer. On the banks of Bhaganga, and the dust of Navadip Mandal, the Bhumi, Gaur Mandal Bhumi, and Goswami Maharaj walking along those paths with his danda with 20-25 sannyasis accompanying him. All of our movement's leaders, everyone wanted to be there on Navadip Mandal Parikrama with Goswami Maharaj. 1 year he this went on for several years, perhaps 3 years, 3-4 years. Every year he would come. It became such a thing. One year he bought a gift for all the devotees, hats from Kashadesh that the devotees had made. It was a special type of a hat, like China, they have these big hats, and you could roll it up and put it in your shoulder bag. There were three, and on the top it said Navadip Mandal Parikrama. He gave a gift to every devotee. For the householders it was white and blue, and Mataji's and Prabhu's, and the sannyasis and brahmacharis is saffron. Those hats were, I had one, I considered it such a insignificant thing. So foolish I am. Such a hat would a collector's item. Krishna Babu, you have one of those hats. Where to find those hats? So Navadip Mandal Parikrama, 15,000 devotees here this year. Another inspiration from the heart of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, the Navadip Mandal Parikrama. Ekadashi fasting. When I had some nice experience in Hong Kong. We were going there. Get paraphernalia. Goswami Maharaj was there. A whole temple was fasting on Ekadashi. Nirjal fast. Never heard of such a thing before. Goswami Maharaj, so many extraordinary things we can reflect on, and also such personal things. We were sitting in the temple room. Oh yeah, VIHE, the systematic shastric study. Another of Tamal Krishna Maharaj established. VIHE. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, Giriraj Maharaj, Kaustubha Prabhu was there, Satsvarup Maharaj. No one was taking a month off, Shankirtan, to go and study in Vrindavan. But Goswami Maharaj went. What was it? Brahma Samhita and other, and Bhagavad Gita, Burijan Prabhu, they would go Kartik month, BIHE. It was extraordinary. Oh, you take a month off, Sankirtan, and you go and study in Vrindavan. Tamal Krishna Goswami. So many devotees were going. And now we have such VIHE. We have so many institutes. Mayapur Institute. It used to be called MIHE. Had developed on that model. Systematic shastric study. Revived by Goswami Maharaj. Then, Ekadashi fasting. I remember there. It was a big thing. It was an honor. Goswami Maharaj said, anyone in the temple, Melbourne, he said, anyone who does the Nirjal fast on the Ekadashi, the following day at the Paran time on the Dwadasi, can break fast with me. He had a whole special recipe. It was 50% milk, 50% water, not sugar, mishra, gur, this is the rock candy. And we would sit in the morning drinking milk after Ekadashi, just because Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj to get his association. In Hong Kong one time we were sitting there in the VIHE, reflecting on VIHE Kartik semester. I was sitting in the temple, I'm chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. And then the devotee taps me on the shoulder. I open my eyes, I see Tamal Krishna is looking at me. And he calls me. He says, bring the nectar of devotion. In the temple room there was Prabhupada's books. There was the Prabhupada's book, Nectar of Devotion. Bring the nectar of devotion. This is in Japa. I bring the nectar. Open at page 89. I see Prabhupada in Japa. And he says, read that. It says Japa and Sankirtan. He says, read that paragraph. Japa should be chanted and murmured in such a way that for only one's hearing, only oneself can hear. A learned scholar of Prabhupada's books. You can quote the exact page to give me instruction. I paid my dandavats and take that as a... So many personal instructions. Goswami Maharaj, we're hearing the ashram, sannyas. We were inspired. We were in the brahmachari ashram for close to 15 years under his inspiration. And then we were changing ashram. He advised me personally, you should marry a Bengali Mataji from a conservative, orthodox, traditional family. That is my instruction to you. Goswami Maharaj ki. He instructed me. And then after entering household life, and then after I hadn't seen him for several years, and came to Mayapur, and he looked at me and he said, so what are you doing? I was in the white cup. What are you doing now? Oh, we're here in Mayapur. We're involved in education. Just see, he said, just see how one's service to the Guru becomes compromised in householder life. Goswami Maharaj ki. Actually, Keshav gave me one block of tilak which I cherish, a cherished treasure. He received from the hand of Srila Gurudev after performing Navadip Mandal Prikrama. One day he said he gave to Keshav his tilak. Keshav gave that tilak to me. I have that, it's on my altar. Keshav instructed me, when you take sannyas, on that day you put on this tilak. I pray that can happen. I still have that tilak, I carry it with me. Now, I was, as Pancharatna Prabhu was mentioning, he was so fortunate to be able to, I couldn't get into those kirtans, so I couldn't get in the room. But in the morning, Goswami Maharaj was reading from Nectar of Instruction in his room, on his last visit, 2002, Nectar of Instruction. There were perhaps 15 or 20 devotees Eka Chakra Prabhu had brought from Taiwan after decades of preaching in Taiwan, with a lot of book distribution, but not many recruiting many devotees. Eka Chakra Prabhu had brought 15 or 20 devotees from Taiwan, and they were initiated by Srila Gurudev on that visit. So in the morning, Srila Gurudev was giving a special classes on Sri Ishupanishad for those devotees. I was attending those classes. Now, it is not a insignificant consideration that I was there for the last lecture, the last public lecture that Srila Gurudev gave in Mayapur before he left in that morning. And we remember that morning, and just that Guru Puja, they're all here now. Sridhar Swami, just before the Guru Puja, he grabbed the microphone. He said, Goswami Maharaj has left us. Sridhar Maharaj, he grabbed the microphone just before the Guru. Goswami Maharaj has left us. Sometimes we reflect, what if he had stayed? How our movement, what things would be different if he hadn't left so quickly? Sridhar Swami, Goswami Maharaj has left us. I remember seeing Bhakti Tree Maharaj in the temple room. I've never seen Bhakti Tree Maharaj like that, like a black cloud just surrounding him. He was just completely morose, just sitting for hours chanting in the temple room. And then that bus came and everyone was here, and then that with Goswami Maharaj's body, and everybody, we put him in samadhi here. He can hear us. Thank you, Rameshwar, for confirming his presence in the samadhi. I take that as a very important instruction. We have the fortune in Mayapur that we can have his association and take his darshan in his samadhi, and shortly we'll be worshipping him there. So that day, that last lecture in the morning, he was just leaving. He was packing and leaving that day. He gave the lecture in the morning. The lecture was Sri Upadeshamrita text number 8. It mentions Upadesha Sharam, the essence of all instruction. And there Srila Rupa Goswami writes, the essence of all instruction is Brajan Tishte, to remain in Vrindavan and cultivate the mood of Braja Bhakti, following an eternal associate of Sri Hare in Brajadam, and cultivate that mood. Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, text 8, Sri Upadeshamrita. Brajan, he was mentioning this verse. And then in his lecture, Goswami Maharaj explained that actually Vrindavan Dham can be entered is more accessible in Mayapur. And he gave the example of Srila Gaukishore Das Babaji Maharaj and Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, who had been performing their bhajan in Radha Kund, and then from Radha Kund they came to Navadip and performed their bhajan in Navadip to enter more deeply into Vrindavan. This is not a coincidental statement that he is making in his last public lecture, that to enter in Mayapur, Vrindavan is more accessible. And then that day, Goswami Maharaj, he was leaving to go to Vrindavan. And he went to Vrindavan here in his samadhi in Mayapur, at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharajer Tirubhav Titi Mahamahotsav ki Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Now I would like to invite His Grace Sarud Damodar Prabhuji to say a few words on the glorification of Shri Gurudev. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj Gurudev ki. His auspicious Disappearance Festival ki. Jai Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Tamal Krishna Goswami Niti Namine. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubha evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Seva Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I am a disciple of Srila His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, and as you all know, it is quite widely known in iskcon that how His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj and His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj was so closely related. They were like almost one soul on two different bodies. They were very loving and affectionate to each other. And in many occasions I had the good fortune to serve them together. And because I was personal servant of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj for many years, since 1978 till almost his final days. Not physically with him, but physically was till almost 2000 years. But I was on different project. But I was always in his, because I was BBT editor. I'm still doing that service in Bengali, to publish Bengali publications, translation, editing, proofreading. My Guru Maharaj has trained me personally. So being this personal servant of my Guru Maharaj and of being Guru Maharaj, a very personal and intimate god brother of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, I had the good fortune to have personal association of Goswami Maharaj. Goswami Maharaj, whenever he came to Calcutta, in those days, my Guru Maharaj used to live in Kolkata because of BBT service. He was the director for the Eastern region BBT, Eastern India BBT, and I was his assistant in BBT also, apart from his personal servant and secretary. So whenever Goswami Maharaj came to Kolkata, he used to live with Guru Maharaj. And as a result, I had the good fortune to serve him personally along with Guru Maharaj. Rather, in those days, whenever he came, I was told to give more attention and take more care of him personally, whatever he needed. And somehow or other, Maharaj was very strict about, and particular about many things, practically each and everything. So I had to be very, very careful and very, very cautious and do things properly. And by the mercy of my Guru Maharaj and training, I was quite competent to take care, and he was very happy with me. And also, because then what happened, and there is not much time, I'll mention 2-3 interactions that I had with Goswami Maharaj, and those are very, very important, opportunities of serving His Holiness. One was mid-80s. Maharaj, I think it is 85 or 86, could be 86. Maharaj came to Mayapur during monsoon. That year he decided to, before that he never stayed in Mayapur until he came during Gaur Purnima festival, for the GBC meeting and Gaur Purnima festival. But that was the first year I saw him, coming to Mayapur and spend 4 months, whole monsoon, 4 months in Mayapur, and he wanted to write some book. So he called me one day, one afternoon, to his room. He was living next room of Srila Prabhupada on the second floor of Lotus building. And he explained to me that what he was going to do during these 4 months. And he said he had a plan to write a book, but I asked him what was the subject matter, and he said he didn't know. He said he was carving a log. He gave this analogy. He was carving a log, and he didn't know what it is going to taking the form, the shape. So he said that he wanted my assistance. He wanted to engage me in that service. I was quite surprised whether I was qualified to do that, and I didn't know why did he choose me, but maybe it out of his love and affection, because he knew me, he had my, he gave me the opportunity in the previous, beforehand, many years I had the opportunity to serve him, or because I was doing BBT, so he might have had some idea that I could have some good concept about scripture, about writing. So what service he gave me was very, very important actually. He said every morning you should come after breakfast to my room, and I will give you the whole list of questions, sarcastic question. And you have to go to different day. After that, you have to go to different Gaudiya mats, meet Srila Prabhupada's God brothers. In those days, 80s, many Prabhupada God brothers were present on the planet. Bhakti Vilas Bharati Maharaj, Bhakti Prapan Damodar Maharaj, Madhusudan Maharaj, so many of them, Sraman Maharaj, Chaitanya Matacharya, and many of them. So he said, you have to go because I can't speak Bengali, and you speak both Bengali and English, so you should go and give this question to them, translate them into English, and get the answers. I want many conclusions, as many as possible. So he made the whole, list, or big, lot of list. There would be some 10 to 15 questions every day. So I would go to different places, and practically I took off from BBT. All day I'd go, and in the evening, afternoon, I would come back around 3-4 o'clock and go to his room and translate them into English, whatever I noted, whatever conclusions I got. So this went on for at least no less than 1 month, every day, non-stop. Then finally, he wrote this book, Jagannath Priya Natakam. So that was one wonderful service opportunity he gave to me, and I had a very close association. And he was so loving, so before I was very scared, because he was so particular, and I wouldn't go very close. And even I would serve, I would, be very careful, and then I thought, I would make mistake every now and then, but he did find out some mistakes, and sometimes he did chastise me, but it was always loving, and in order to rectify me, and in order to teach me, train me, and I did learn during those days from his instructions. Then another time, another 3-4 years, after 3-4 years, I think it was 88 or 89, he was going to install the first deities in China land, Hong Kong, not mainland, China mainland, but Hong Kong. And Atma Tattva Prabhu, I think most of you know Atma Tattva Prabhu, South Indian Brahmin, who is to head the Gurukul, ritualistic performances, and he was actually making curriculum. He was doing so many different things. He is like the pioneer, bringing all these yajna and all these rituals and adivas. He was the pioneer. He is the one who started this, and he imported them from South India. So Atmadatta Prabhu was supposed to go and perform this ceremony, 3-day ceremony, big program. Maharaj invited all big government officials of Hong Kong, government officials. But then what happened, just few days before the festival, Atmadatta Prabhu got sick, very sick, and he couldn't go. So he was going to send one of his students from Gurukul, who was from Latin America. He was also very expert. He was one of Atmadatta Prabhu's close advanced students. And Atmadatta Prabhu was going to send him. But what happened, he had visa problem, and he couldn't go either. So then finally Maharaj was in big trouble. He was so much in anxiety. Festival was fixed, it was big, and it was the first big festival in China land. And first deity installation, Gaur Nitai. So, and I took off from BBT management, BBT service. I was also involved in the Mayapur management. I took off I was disciple of Bhavananda Prabhu, was also very dearmost friend of Srila Goswami Maharaj, and he just left. And being his disciple, I was very, as you can imagine, I was devastated. So I took off from everything. I drove myself, I went to Vrindavan. I was living in Krishna Balaram temple. I was worshipping Gaur Nitai. I was just trying to divert myself from the situation. I was trying to come out of the trauma. And Goswami Maharaj was not here at that time. Srila Bhakti Charan Maharaj, he was not here at that time. He was my Shiksha Guru, and even Bhavananda Prabhu told me that even I may be your Guru, but Bhakti Charan Maharaj understand you much better, so always stick to Maharaj. And I was somehow or other, I was very attached to Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and he was very loving and very affectionate to me. I mean, in Mayapur everybody knows that. So I took off, I went to Vrindavan, I was worshipping Gaur Nitai. But that, during what the time frame I'm talking about, that Maharaj was looking for a pujari, priest to go to Hong Kong to install Gaur Nitai deities, and there was no qualified pujaris. Because Nathan Prabhu just started that program, he couldn't train many people. So I knew some puja in Mayapur, from Mayapur, and then when I went to Vrindavan, I learned some more. And I knew some rituals. So I was visiting Mayapur for a week for something important. And I was in Kolkata that time. And one day I received a call from Srila Goswami Maharaj. My name was Dharadhar at that time. And he said, Dharadhar, this is the situation. He explained, he talked to me on like almost half an hour over the phone. This is the situation. I have invited so many government officials. This is the very first installation, deity installation. And this is the very first mega program in China land. So no way we can lose this opportunity. And field is very, very, matured, very fertile now, and we have to do something. So this is the situation. He told me the whole background, and then he said, somebody mentioned your name. He didn't mention the name. Who mentioned to him? Somebody mentioned you, somebody responsible mentioned to me your name, and you know how I know you. You already served me. And I have a lot of, I trust you. I know that you can do things. You are trained by your Guru Maharaj. So, and somebody told that you can do it. So please come to Hong Kong. I'll arrange everything. It was not even 1 week left. And I don't remember, most probably I didn't have the passport either. I don't remember. I never went to outside India by that time. So I said to Maharaj, I came to Kolkata for a week, and now I have to go back, otherwise the head pujari will be very upset. He said, I am going to call Purnachandra Prabhu, he was the head pujari. He said, I am going to call him and tell him the intensity of the requirement. So this is more important than your daily puja. Anybody can, replace you for a few days or for a month or so. But this cannot be, we cannot lose this opportunity to serve and, preach Srila Prabhupada's mission in China land. So I said to Maharaj, if you take care of that part, I have no problem. I am there to obey your order. So yes, you just get ready and everything will be arranged for you. You don't have to worry anything. You just get on the plane and come here. There will be people to receive you, and everything will be arranged here and there, in India, in China. You just have to follow, somebody will escort you all the time. That's okay. So then in a week or less than a week, I flew to Hong Kong. And 3 days big festival, and I took some over the phone, I took some some suggestions, some more instructions from Atma Tattva Prabhu, and that devotee Prem Bikash Prabhu was going to go also. And then I did, and then I consulted Hari Bhakti Vilas, Shatkriya Shadvipika. I took some note. It was just like that. I was just doing on emergency basis, and I thought it is very important. I have to do it properly because we are doing DT installation, otherwise there will be offense, and also it has to be impressive because the government officials are going to come. Government in Hong Kong, there's also like many Indians are there. So I was trying to prepare as best as possible. I mean, I was trying my best, level best. So I studied all day, and I was preparing, trying to remember so many things while they were preparing my, other things, traveling things. So by the time it was ready, I flew, I got there, and next morning, not next morning, but the day next, but I had only one day in between before the festival started. I had to prepare every single thing, and, including collecting cow dung and so many. They took me miles away to get the cow dungs. So many different things I had to arrange in one day time. And then 3 days there was a big program. Maharaj was there on every day in the program. Giridhari Maharaj and many other senior leaders. Somehow or other, I was nervous. That was the first installation. I was not trained. And Maharaj personally was present there. But somehow or other I overcame by the mercy of Maharaj, my Guru Maharaj, Prabhupada, and Gaur Nitai. And it was like every day, like 4 or 5 hours yajna and recitation of mantras and different lanes of rituals to be performed. So many different things. And another difficulty was there, except Maharaj and Giridhari Maharaj and whoever the visitors were, nobody spoke English. So I couldn't communicate much help from anybody. I mean, they helped. They really they served me like an acharya. But they couldn't speak those days much English. So it was very challenging, but it was very, very. Finally, after 3 days, Maharaj was so happy. He was so happy. He just, gave me a big hug every day practically. And every time, like lunch, every day he was inviting me to take lunch with him. He said, Maharaj, no, I am supposed to serve you. He said, no, this, you must do it. It is my order. So I got such a wonderful experience. It was very challenging, it is very heavy experience, but very sweet. It was sweet conclusion. So finally Maharaj, and then he gave such a wonderful letter to the head pujari and the management of Vrindavan, then why he had to go without that permission and this and that, and he gave me a whole description of the yajna and everything, and he said it is our, like he kind of praised me. I have still that letter with me. That's my lifetime achievement. That is that one letter and one letter from my Guru Maharaj that I had after my accident. I had a big accident. I almost died. So Guru Maharaj wrote from the west. He was in the west. So these 2 letters are my lifetime achievement. I always worship them. Almost every day I touch my head. So I had this kind of relationship with him, but I always try to maintain the relationship in such a way that, and it was good because of his grave and, grave appearance and his strictness. I always considered him to be beyond my reach. Even he gave me the opportunity to serve him so closely, but I never considered him to be an ordinary human being. I always considered him like, he's somebody coming from Vaikuntha Lok. And that helped, his characteristic, divine characteristic helped me to consider that way. Still I made mistake and I had heavy chastisement from him, but that was also another way of his mercy. One time I was ready to, I was also in Mayapur. He had one, I don't know, still he has that room. I don't stay in Mayapur these days. And I was in America for many, many years. So he had one room, very last room on the 2nd floor of Conch building. And I had the responsibility, because I used to live in Mayapur all the time, and I was in Mayapur management in those days. I was also my Guru Maharaj's home secretary. So I had the responsibility to take care of every single thing. He would leave, every time he would come, he would leave and he would give me the whole list of things to take care of. And I used to maintain his room. I was his room's caretaker, his Mayapur ashram's caretaker. So there are many other things, but time is, I think there are so many other speakers. But these two incidents, his compiling his book, writing his book, and his journal and first detailed installation Gaunitai. And in Thailand also, like, I wanted to leave right away after the festival because I was kind of shocked. I never left India. And what I saw in Hong Kong, the gross materialistic part, it was like cultural shock for me. And I went after the festival, immediately I wanted to leave. And Maharaj called to his room and he hugged me and said, Sharmada, we have invited Gaunitai, these devotees, they don't know anything. If you don't train, if you don't stay up for a month or so, at least as many days it takes, and train them, Gaunitai there will be no proper treatment of Gaunitai. So please train them before you leave Hong Kong. I know what you are saying. You don't have to leave the temple. You stay in the temple, within the temple. You don't have to look outside. But just stay here. Because in India, now India is, because of globalization, India has adopted so many habits, Western habits. But in those days, India was more traditional, more conservative. No Western influence. So I was shocked when I went out in Hong Kong and I saw things. So I did every single thing to train them, to take nice care of Gaunitai. And then I left. So this way, but unfortunately when Maharaj left his pastimes on this planet, when he left this planet, I was not here personally. I don't know, it could be good in the sense I could do some service during that time, or it could be worse, I could be very much devastated, as it happened after my Guru Maharaj's departure. Still I cannot go to his room, because I lived in that room with him on the Conch building. I don't go to that room. I get completely broken, breaks me. Only place I come to his samadhi. I don't go to a join. The whole place is full of his memories. So it could be worse. I was here and he was leaving, he was putting in the samadhi. I didn't come to my Guru Maharaj's samadhi either. Situation was like that. Not many people gather together because of Corona. But if I wanted to come, I could be permitted, but I didn't come because I couldn't take that. So unfortunately I was not there, but I saw when my Guru Maharaj came to America, I was broke by looking at him. He was so thin, his eyes were always watery, like tears are always there. I am talking about Bhakti Maharaj. He was literally was crying all the time. And only thing he was doing in those days, going around and glorifying Tamal Krishna Maharaj. That was his, he did that for next at least 2-3 years. And by looking at him, I became sick. He's so sick, and he became sick by losing the association of Sri Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So this was the intimacy of them there. I many times had the opportunity. I was also temple president of Jagannath Temple for 10 years, 90 through 2000. In those days, my Guru Maharaj also, whenever he came and stayed in Jagannath Temple. And Maharaj, Sri Tamal Krishna Maharaj didn't stay there, but he came for prasad for many times. He said, this is the best prasad in the world. So many times I brought prasad to his room, and many times he went to Jagannath temple, and many times both of them came together and took prasad. And they used to do so many things, cut joke to each other, and I would serve them personally. So I had this good fortune to have association of this great personality. It is beyond my imagination. I wouldn't even dream to have association of great personalities like them. But by the causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada and their Lordship, Sri Radha Madhav, Mayapur Chandra, Gaur Nitai Nishingadev Jagannath Dev, I had the opportunity. I tried my best to serve him, serve them, and out of their causeless mercy, they did accept my service despite all my mistakes, and now I don't know when I'll again meet them and whether I'll be qualified to go to where they are. But it's all I leave it on the mercy of the Vaishnavas, and to all of you, please accept my humble obeisances and bless me so that I can make progress in the path of spiritual life and serve the Vaishnavas under the shelter of Srila Prabhupada. Jai Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki,
Jai.
His divine Disappearance festival ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Taigo Pramanande
Hari Hari Bol.
Sarup Damodar, Lord Chaitanya's secretary, his right-hand man. He would screen people before they spoke with Lord Chaitanya. If they had something to present to Lord Chaitanya, Sarup Damodar would always have to be seen first before going into the Lord's chambers in Gambhira Mat. So Tamal Krishna Goswami, he was very close to Prabhupada. He had a relationship that was unique, that I never saw anybody else have. He was, if Prabhupada has eternal associates, then that he would be one of them. When the six Goswamis appeared, Prabhupada said that every time Lord Chaitanya appears, he has eternal associates. And they perform the pastime of being born or being in families of non-devotees and becoming devotees, like Haridas Thakur, the six Goswamis. So Tamal Krishna Goswami took birth in New York, which was coincidentally where Srila Prabhupada would begin iskcon. In 1967, Tamal Krishna Goswami went to California, like a lot of young people of his age. And Srila Prabhupada had become established in California, New York, California. And the devotees had hired out an auditorium that held hundreds of people to do a program. But it was a free feast. And the problem sometimes with free things, then people don't take them very seriously. They think there's something wrong with it. It's the problem with giving out free books, that people, they actually appreciate something they pay for more. So they had a free feast, free program, Srila Prabhupada, a great opportunity, but only 10 people showed up. And out of those 10 people, one of them was Thomas Hirsig. And Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture and opened the floor for questions. And Tamal Krishna Goswami raised his hand and he said, what happens to somebody if they begin this process of yoga but they're not able to finish it? Aren't they so they're not here and there? Interesting, it's the same question that Arjuna asked Krishna. Was a person become a riven cloud? And Prabhupada answered the question just like Krishna answered the question to Arjuna, that there's no loss or diminution on this process. Whatever you begin, if you don't complete it or if you stop,
eventually you'll pick it back up, and eventually you'll complete Bhakti Yoga and go back home, back to Godhead. So after that, Srila Prabhupada said, that was a very intelligent question for somebody's first question. That Prabhupada was really impressed. And then Srila Prabhupada went to a farm. There was some people that tried to have like an alternative lifestyle called the Morning Star Ranch. And they were trying to live off the land. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj he had migrated to this farm and was living in a tree. He had himself a tree house. And he would play flutes all day and meditate. And then he met Srila Prabhupada and immediately became Prabhupada's follower, and they went back down to San Francisco, and he got initiated along with his friend Vishnu John Swami. And from the very beginning, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a leader in ISKCON, and he went and became temple president in Los Angeles in 1968. 1969, he was Sankirtan leader in London. And Srila Prabhupada he already had this relationship where Prabhupada needed something done, he would send Tamal Krishna Goswami. 1970, they came to India, and whenever Prabhupada would go somewhere, he would always take Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Like there was some incident in New Vrindavan where Srila Prabhupada decided he wanted to leave America for a while. He said, let us go to Japan. So us always meant, to Prabhupada, us was Srila Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Goswami. That's what us meant. And they went to Japan. They got the beginnings. They printed the Krishna book, and so many of Prabhupada's books were printed there. And they had a discussion with Dai Nippon, the head of the book publishing company, where Prabhupada was, Tamal Krishna Maharaj would tell the book company that they were going to pay a ridiculously low price for the books, and the Japanese Dai Nippon, they wanted a higher price, and then Prabhupada mediated and tried to come through as satisfy everybody, and ended up with a really good low price. And then he was Prabhupada's servant and secretary in India, and established the Juhu Beach Temple. He bought the property here in Mayapur. Just one thing after another, Tamal Krishna Maharaj is doing for Prabhupada, like really significant things that we all are still benefited to this day. Then he went with Vishnu John Swami and started the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj had this idea that, along with Vishnu John Swami, that we'll bring, instead of waiting for people to come to the temple, we'll bring the temple to them. We'll put deities on the bus, and we'll make the bus into a temple. And that was another thing that he contributed. How many buses do they have that come out of Mayapur right now? Anybody can tell me? Buses with deities? 5? I hear 10. All right, 10 buses. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he invented that idea. So we owe so much to him in ISKCON. In 1974, I became a devotee, and I joined in a Portland Hare Krishna temple up in Portland, Oregon, Northwest Territories. And I was cleaning the basement of the temple, and I saw a Back to Godhead magazine. After I got done with my service, I looked at this Back to Godhead magazine that was in the basement, and it had an article by Vishnu John Swami and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. In The Servant of the Servant, there's some pictures from that article. Especially powerful was the picture of Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu John Maharaj on both sides of Sri Sri Radha and Damodar. with big T-lock, and the power. I just looked at that picture, and I just looked at it for about 10 minutes, and I read the article, and then I looked at that picture, and I just thought, I've got to be part of this. This is there must be a way. So I went to Dinabandhu Prabhu, the temple president, and I told him I really want to join this Radha Damodar party. And he said, no, you can't do that. We have a deal with your parents. You're going to school. Because I was 16 at the time. You know, some parents, when their kids would join the temple, they hire deprogrammers, try to get them back. Well, with my parents, when I wanted to join the temple, they just said to the president, yeah, please take him. And then I had to go to the morning program, go to high school, and then come back in the evening programs, and then spend a weekend on book distribution. So it was good times, but I felt a real strong urge to be part of the Radha Damodar party. So this devotee, Devarshi, said to me that if you're not satisfied with the temple president, you can go over his head and talk to the GBC. He said, actually, you can go right over the head of the president and talk, the GBC's coming next week. And that was Jayatirtha. So Jayatirtha was in the habit of telling young people to run away from home and we'll just hide you. And that's what he told me. He said that, you shouldn't have to go to high school. You go to join the Radha Damodar party. I'll talk to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I'll call him on the phone. I'll let him know you're coming. And so I sold some stuff, and I got on a plane, and I got picked up by Adi Keshava, he was just abandoning his post as the temple president of Boston to join the Radha Damodar party. He picked me up in Atlanta. So all these devotees were coming to the Radha Damodar party from so many different directions. Goswami was making devotees. He would preach to people. They had a festival, and Vishnu John Swami would set up on a college campus. They bring the deities. They bring prasadam. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj would scan the crowd, and if he saw somebody that was chanting, then he would go and talk to them. And sometimes they would just join the bus. He would say, come with us on the bus. And they were like right in between classes in the university. They'd go and they empty out their locker and they get on the bus. And he said, we usually go down to the Florida Keys. So then a man would end up out on book distribution in Des Moines, Iowa, in the snow the next week. But it's this way the bus party started expanding. So I got to Florida in Gainesville, and Vishnu John Swami had his whole assembly. They had sitar, esraj. You can go on YouTube and find Vishnu John Swami bhajans. So they decided to put me on, and then I began set my life in the Radha Damodar party. It was so ecstatic. It was hard work also. We would have a morning program. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was super organized. And he had the buses going in different directions, and he had a map of America. And he would, like a commander, I remember he was 29 years old, and he was managing all these buses and all these men and sending everybody. So then it was said that we're going to meet Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's coming to Atlanta. And so all the buses and everybody came from all over. We were in Texas, and we drove all night. So then we went to Mangal Arati, and then finally Srila Prabhupada came back from his morning walk. So when Prabhupada came into the Atlanta temple, he lit up the whole place. He was so effulgent. And I watched Prabhupada as he glided by. I say glided because he wasn't quite touching the ground. It was like a hovercraft. And then he went into the temple room, and I thought, he's so fast. How could somebody 80 years old be on the move like that? And then Prabhupada paid his obeisances. I was greeting the deities, and I had a chance. So Prabhupada's lotus feet were right in front of me, so I You know how sometimes here in Mayapur you pay your obeisances and you got somebody's feet right in front of you? Well, this was, Prabhupada's feet were right there, so I just grabbed them and held on for a moment. And nothing bad came out of that, so Prabhupada got up, he just looked at me for a second, and then it was announced that we were going to meet Srila Prabhupada. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had us all shave up and get ready, and he was going to personally introduce each one of us to Srila Prabhupada. So we were coming up the stairs to Srila Prabhupada's room in Atlanta, and the secretary came out and said, "You can't come and see Prabhupada right now, you don't have an appointment." And Tamal Krishna Maharaj just looked at him, and the secretary's like, "Okay," and got to the side. And he brought us in, and then I put a flower on the desk. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "This is Bhakti Michael. He joined our party at a young age." And Prabhupada looked at me and said, "Oh, very good." And then each one of us were introduced to Prabhupada one at a time till we were all stuffed into the room. And then Srila Prabhupada said, "You are all Vaikuntha men." And then he told us that he was always thinking about I'm always thinking about you boys in the vans. I really appreciate that you're distributing my books and Back to Godhead magazines. And if you stay brahmachari, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. He didn't really order us to stay brahmachari. He just said that his spiritual master was brahmachari and then took sannyas. And he said that you have a good leader with Tamal Krishna Goswami, and he motioned to Goswami. He said, "You just follow him, and I'll be pleased." So that was an amazing endorsement. And I looked at the two of them together, and I realized that Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they've been together a long time. And I'll try to speed it up because there's so many things I could say happened on the Radha Damodar party, but I'll fast forward. We went to Chicago. We got initiated. Prabhupada installed deities with all the buses. Now Tamal Krishna Maharaj has an army of Sankirtan brahmacharis, 140 men, 5 buses, 20 vans, and Rameshwar Prabhu can tell you how much he was contributing to the BBT every month. It was huge. And then this went on. We had a fantastic marathon, and Srila Prabhupada gave me my name. He said, "Your name is Mr. Bhagavan Das, just chant Hare Krishna." So I got my beads. We all got initiated, 80 men in one day. Imagine. And then we had blockbuster Sankirtan scores. And then came March 1976. And while we were doing Sankirtan, I'd like to mention that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was personally, he was like Narada Muni, and he was popping in and out. He would show up in all the different vans and all the different buses, and he was just running around the country, enlivening everybody and keeping the whole thing going. He had a winter menu and a summer menu of prasadam. A summer menu was sabji, salad, and Vishnujan Swami nectar. When I have more time, I can give you the recipe. And then there was a winter menu was hot milk, sabji, and halva. So, and then there was dial a bhajan and dial the sauce. One day I goofed off on Sankirtan. A devotee told me you could take a little sleep during the day, and by going in Sears and sleeping on the couch downstairs, because nobody buys furniture during the week. So I did that, and I got back, and I only collected $17 and 17 back to Godheads. So Goswami says, "Mr. Bhagavan, your Sankirtan results are unacceptable." He had this way of saying things, And then it was so powerful, and then he said, "Tomorrow it'll be $100 and 100 BTGs, or you're off the party. And you'll have to become a temple brahmachari," which is the greatest disgrace. Because a temple brahmachari, he had his own possessions and he slept in the same place every night, and he was considered almost a grihacharya. So I didn't want that to happen. So I worked really hard, and I came back with $98.50. And Goswami knew that I'd really put out, so he smiled and gave me a big pakora. And then, so we were all working very hard like this, and he came up with a program called Dial the Bhajan or Dial the Sauce. And Dial the Sauce meant you could call Tamal Krishna Maharaj and have a little lecture over the telephone in the middle of the day. And Dial the Bhajan was Vishnu Jan Swami would sing a song for you. Well, I'd already had enough sauce, so I decided to go for Dial the Bhajan. So I called up, and Vishnu Jan Swami, just like he promised, he drags the harmonium into the phone booth. And I'm in a phone booth in Flint, Michigan. He was in Detroit. And he said, so, Vishnu Jan Swami was always like poetic. He was an amazing person. Yeah? Every time he spoke was like poetry. And he said, what would you like to hear? And I said, well, how about that song that you wrote the tune for? Because Prabhupada said, write a tune. We need a tune for this song called Vrindavan. So you can also hear that on YouTube, Vrindavan, Tamal Vishnu Jan Swami. So he puts the telephone on the top of the harmonium and sings this whole song for me over the phone. Vrindavan Ramaya Stana. He sang the song, he told me the translation, and then he said, there was a brahmachari named Nakula Brahmachari that wherever he went, the potency of Lord Chaitanya would manifest through him. You should be like that brahmachari. And whoever you meet today, manifest the mercy of Lord Chaitanya upon them and sell them one of Srila Prabhupada's books. So that was life on Radha Damodar. And then we went to India. I'll conclude with the final story. We got to Mayapur, and everybody was on parikram and having a festival, and we were sent out. Whenever devotees were walking around, they had cameras on, and they were going like on holiday, and we were sent to the main gate to do Gitar Gans all day. Gitar Gan, Ek Rupya. And I didn't feel bad about it. I felt like we're the elite, everybody's taking a day off, and we're out on book distribution. We just got done doing 2 years of book distribution. We get to Mayapur, more book distribution all day long. And then Vishnu Jan Swami disappeared, and the next day Tamal Krishna Maharaj was facing the music up here in the Lotus building where he got sent to China. All these people were complaining because so many people wanted to join the Radha Damodar party. And the householders kind of combined together, the people running the temples, and they all complained to Prabhupada. Prabhupada loved Tamal Krishna Maharaj and the Radha Damodar party, and certainly could have said, well, I'm real happy with what he's doing. But Prabhupada had another plan for Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And it came out when Prabhupada said, so what should we do? Asking Tamal Krishna Maharaj, all these people are complaining. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, well, Prabhupada, maybe I should just go to China. And Prabhupada said, yes. And Goswami said, no. He said, yes. He said, I was just joking. You can't go to China. He said, Prabhupada said, yes, you can go to China. You will go to China. And then Guru Kripa said, well, Prabhupada, I'll go to China. And Prabhupada said, no, he must go. And then the Prabhupada went out on the morning walk, and I slipped onto the morning walk, and we went up the stairs on the roof. I put my chudar way over my head. I really wanted to be on this morning walk, and Pancharatna was there with a stick trying to make sure that people like me wouldn't get on the morning walk. So I managed to get past that, and we got up on the roof of the Lotus building. And Prabhupada, he turned around and he faced all the GBCs and sannyasis and presidents that were on the walk. because there's 500 devotees here, so you had to kind of narrow it down. And Prabhupada, he put out his bead bag and his cane. He turned around and he was walking backwards with his arms open. And he said, "You'll all be happy to know, Tamal is going to China." So like I said, I could talk about Tamal Krishna Maharaj the rest of the day, but we have a short time here, so I just wanted to say that he was Srila Prabhupada's personal right-hand man. They have an extremely close relationship, and Srila Prabhupada counted on him, he trusted him, and he loved him.
Jai Bhutale Srimate Tamal Krishna Goswaminiti Namane. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarne. It's an honor to speak and to be with you all here today. Thank you. I'm filled with so many mixed emotions being here in Mayapur on this day. Happy memories, and also a feeling of loss in the heart as well. And because time is short, and because Srila Gurudev's, as others have been mentioning, we could talk about him from so many different angles, so many different facets of his service. But if I had to pick one, it would be related to what Atul Krishna Prabhu was saying earlier, is that if I think primarily, how do I understand Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami? What did he show? What did he exemplify? What did he embody? I would say what he embodied was what it meant to be the disciple of a guru. And whatever facet of his service he manifested, that was the common thread. That was the energy that was there within it always. Wherever you poke, any aspect of his life, any aspect of his service, that was the energy that was running through it, and it was running through it in a way that was very, very powerful. So powerful that even in an effort to serve him, if one was not, if one wasn't approaching it with the proper seriousness, he was very intolerant to any kind of obstacle to accomplishing his tasks. And so, as I'm sure many of you know, that would often manifest in a terrifying, honestly, terrifying experiences with him. I'm just curious quickly if those who had the opportunity to meet him personally and speak with him could raise their hands, so that I just understand. So it's actually not even close to the majority. Most had never met him. You might have heard stories like this, but unless you actually experienced it, you don't know what it was like to feel that fear in the heart. It was quite strong. But he's known for that. But really the way that, again, primarily the way that I understand him is as what it means to be a disciple of a guru. And as his disciple, how he would go into your heart and very effectively begin to remove anything that was not aligned with his heart, that was not aligned with Srila Prabhupada's heart. And he would do that through his words, he would do that through his instructions, he would do that through his chastisements, he would do that through his kindness, he would do that through his glances. Simply the way that he could look at you could change your heart. And when I was 20 years old, I lived in New York City, and I had a group of friends that were, I can't describe just how lost we were. These were kids that were the wildest New York street kids that you could possibly imagine. But somehow, the neighborhood where we hung out was around Tompkins Square Park, where Srila Prabhupada began the Hare Krishna movement. And I think somehow some grace of that tirtha brought even us, even these wildest kids, to take an interest in bhakti, to take an interest in Krishna consciousness. And one day I was walking down the street and I ran into a friend of mine, and he said that in the apartment of another friend of ours there's going to be a Hare Krishna program today. Do you want to go? And I had been reading Prabhupada's books, and they were ringing true with me. I was searching spiritually, and everything Prabhupada was saying was making sense to me, but I wasn't ready to say this is my life, this is the truth. And so when the person asked me, would you want to go to this program, I said, no, not really. And he said, well, there'll be good food there, And we had very little money, and the opportunity to get a good meal was, a welcome opportunity. So I said, you're right, I'll go. So that evening I went to the apartment of this friend of mine. It was in one of the worst ghetto neighborhoods of New York City. And I went up and I went into the apartment. It was a very small apartment, and it was almost empty of furniture. And there was just a handful of us, maybe myself and maybe about 5 or 6 of my friends, who were more into Krishna Bhakti at this point. And I didn't know what was going on, because they were my friends. I knew them as these crazy street kids, but somehow this Hare Krishna program was going on in their apartment. And then in walked Tamal Krishna Goswami. And my friends were bowing down to him, which is something I'd never seen before. And he sat down and he spoke. Again, it was just maybe...
Tamal Krishna Padaya
Krishna Preshaya Bhutale
Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Namaste Saraswati Devi Nirvishesha Sandhavadi Panchakalpataru Rasta Patitana Bhavanebhyo Jai Tamal Krishna Swami Ki
Jai Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj Ki
Kakamati Vasalam
Pangong Langayate Girim
Akhivatama Nande
Shri Gurum Dinatarinam
Pavananda Madhavam
Shri Chaitanya Mishwaram
Hari Om Tat Sat.
Hari Om Tat Sat.
So we're having a meeting of the Mayapur Executive Board.
So we were having the meeting of the Mayapur Executive Board,
And when I stuck out to participate in this program,
and I stalked out to participate in this program.
Tamal Krishna Swami was always connected to the Mayapur project.
Tamal Krishna Goswami was always connected to the Mayapur project.
And he was such a person that when Prabhupada had a difficult work, he would entrust it to His Holiness.
He was such a person, when Srila Prabhupada had a difficult task, he would entrust it to His Holiness.
So, Prabhupada wanted to buy land in Mayapur, and at that time, price was 11,000 rupees a biga.
So Prabhupada wanted to buy a land in Mayapur. At that time, the price was 11,000 rupees a biga.
Now, it's 10 or 20, even 35 lakhs per kata.
So now it is even 10 or 20 or 30 or 35 lakh rupees per kata.
And 20 katas a biga.
And 20 katas is a biga.
So, he gave the money to buy I forget how many dinas, 11,000 rupees a dina.
So he gave the money. I don't remember exactly how many bigas, but 11,000 rupees per biga.
And he gave the money to Tamal Krishna Goswami.
And he gave the money to Tamal Krishna Goswami.
Tamal Krishna Goswami wanted to be sure that he fulfilled Prabhupada's request.
Tamal Krishna Goswami, he wanted to make sure that he fulfilled Srila Prabhupada's request.
So, since there's only 100 rupee notes at that time,
Since there was only 100 rupee note at that time,
and so he wrote the serial number of each note in the transfer deed.
so he wrote that each serial number of each note in a transfer deed,
In the sales deed.
in the sales deed.
I normally writes the serial number of the bills,
Normally he writes the serial numbers of the bills,
but he wanted to be very sure that he was carrying out Prabhupada's order.
he wanted to be very sure that he was carrying out Srila Prabhupada's order.
Extra careful.
He wanted to be extra careful.
And when we were building the oldest building, then we had brought steel and cement and things from Calcutta.
So when we were building the Lotus building, we brought steel, cement from Calcutta.
And I remember riding in the trucks
So I remember riding in the trucks
with Tamal Krishna Goswami.
with Tamal Krishna Goswami.
And a truck driver stopped at one Jolly Dava
And the truck driver stopped at one Punjabi dabba
and said, "You should please take some nice hot milk."
and he said, you should please take some nice hot milk.
I was drinking the hot milk, and someone told us they're stealing your iron.
So while we were drinking the hot milk, someone told that they are stealing your iron
They're throwing it in the ditch.
and they are throwing it in the ditch.
So when we ran out, and sure enough, we saw that they had thrown some iron rods in the ditch.
So when we ran out and we saw that it was for sure enough, they have thrown some iron rods in the ditch.
So he was going to great austerity, riding on the lorries, buying the property.
So he was willing to take these austerities, riding on the lorries, finding the properties.
Doing everything to please Srila Prabhupada.
He did everything to please Srila Prabhupada.
And that selfless service continued to his last breath.
And that selfless service continued to his last breath.
In 1980s, he started Harinam Kirtan
In 1980s, he started this Harinam Kirtan
amongst the GBC members.
amongst the GBC members.
Now we have a Kirtan Mela.
Now we have the Kirtan
They're
Mela
all enjoying.
and you all are enjoying.
But that was originally started by Tamal Krishna Goswami with all the GBCs.
But that was originally started by Tamal Krishna Goswami with all the GBCs.
And he'll also read the Chaitanya Charitamrita and different sacred books.
And he also would read from the Chaitanya Charitamrita and different sacred books.
So that a kind of higher spiritual association.
So that was a kind of a higher spiritual association.
And we heard that the different levels of disciple.
So we heard that there are different levels of disciples.
And A dumb disciple doesn't follow the Guru.
A dumb disciple, Adam disciple doesn't follow the Guru.
A Kanishta disciple follows, but not very good.
The Kanishta disciple follows, but
Not very good.
not very good.
A Madhyam Adhikari, he follows strictly.
The Madhyam Adhikari, he follows strictly.
Uttam disciple, even without the Guru is telling him, he understands and does it.
Uttam disciple, even without the Guru telling him, he understands the Guru's desire.
I personally witnessed in the endowment how Prabhupada just raised his hand and then immediately Tamal Krishna over the window.
I personally witnessed in Vrindavan how Srila Prabhupada waved his hands and Tamal Krishna Maharaj immediately opened the windows.
He knew exactly what Prabhupada wanted, even he didn't say anything.
He knew exactly what Srila Prabhupada wanted, even he didn't say anything.
So, he was a very unique devotee.
So he was a very unique devotee.
And I'm missing his association a lot.
And I am missing his association a lot.
I just want to speak a few words.
I'm just wanted to speak a few words.
And he was my first GBC when I was a temple president.
He was my first GBC when I was a temple president.
And I couldn't really satisfy him.
I couldn't really satisfy him.
But nonetheless, I think he was a very wonderful devotee.
But nonetheless, I think he's a very wonderful devotee.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki, Srila Goswami Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay. I think we left off. I was sitting in an apartment in New York as a lost teenager with a few friends of mine. And Tamal Krishna Goswami, who is at that time arguably the most important and influential leader in the Krishna consciousness movement, he sat down with just the few of us, me and my friends, and he spoke. And the words went into my ear, and they did something to my heart that had never been done before. And so when I walked out of that room, I said, this is what I have to dedicate my life to. Somehow I knew that. And shortly thereafter, within a few days, I was following the regulative principles and chanting 16 rounds a day. And not long after that, from that day, I truly knew nothing about what a guru was. I had no education in that. But because of the way that he spoke and touched my heart, I knew that. And I knew that he was very close and important to Srila Prabhupada. So based on those two things, I accepted him as my guru in my heart. And shortly after that, he accepted me as his disciple. And I'll just share a couple short things that speak to the point that I made earlier about how he would enter the heart of the disciple and change that heart in many different ways. And shortly after that time, I became a book distributor. And often I would have to go out alone. And one day I went out alone. I was in Texas, which is very foreign to me, foreign place. And I was distributing in a parking lot of a store. And a police officer came out and physically assaulted me. And then took me into a private room where he beat me still more. And then arrested me. And eventually he accused me of beating him. and I was found guilty of that crime. But fortunately, I was going to India for the first time about a month after that. And I came here for the first time here in Mayapur. And I was called to come see my guru, Tamal Krishna Goswami. And he was staying in his room on the Conch building. And just outside that room, there's a balcony. And I knew that he knew what had happened to me. But he didn't say a word about it. He was just happy to see me and smiled and welcomed me to Mayapur. He said, "Welcome to the spiritual world." And then he sat down on the ground, and he was receiving a massage from Bajracharu Prabhu, one of the brahmacharis here at the time. And he gave me a copy of the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and he pointed to the page that I was supposed to read from. So he had me read while he was being massaged, and what he had me read was the pastime of Haridas Thakur being beaten. He didn't say a word to me about what had happened to me. He just sat, welcomed me, had me read that, and then he would look at me. He would look at me in the eyes. And it was very clear, what was happening in my heart was, it's hard for me to describe, but it was without any words. He found a way to go very deep into my heart and express many things. He was expressing that whatever I was enduring on behalf of him, on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, was a small thing. But that it was a glorious thing, and in a sense I was being accepted into the family. Right? And that I was his servant now. That together we were serving Srila Prabhupada and serving Sri Chaitanya. And I was now a person who came from a completely different part of the world and was uneducated and uncultured and impure, was somehow accepted. And it was a very profound meaning. And it was done in such a thoughtful way. This is the point that I wanted to share. He was, although he could be very heavy and his words could be strike terror in the heart, he also had an incredibly thoughtful way of dealing with people, an incredibly gentle way of dealing with people. Every word was effective. Every word went in very deep. And maybe I'll just share just one or two very quick things that speak a bit to this. I remember once I was serving him in Vrindavan, and he asked me to invite another sannyasi to come for breakfast. And I went to that sannyasi and I said, Tamal Krishna Goswami has invited you for breakfast this morning. And that sannyasi said, "Oh, I would really like to come, but I am doing something else this time, but please thank him for me." And I said, "Okay." And I went back and he said, "Did you talk to this sannyasi?" I said, "Yes." I said, "But he said he couldn't make it." He said, "Why couldn't he make it?" I said, "I don't know." He said he couldn't come. He said, "You didn't even ask him why?" "No, I don't know." He said, "This is your problem." He says that you think to serve the Guru is just a simple thing like an ordinary material affair. He says, but that's not what it is. He says to be a disciple means that you have to understand the heart of your Guru. And you make the desire of your Guru your heart, your desire, right? That your heart has to become completely aligned with the heart of the Guru, that his desires become your desire. If you really desired that he come here as much as I desired that he come here, he would be coming here. Now go back and ask him again. And so I would go back. I said to this sannyasi, please, I'm begging you that my Guru he really wants to have breakfast with you. It would mean so much to him, it would mean so much to me. I'm begging you, please, could you please come? He said, oh, of course, I'll come. Like this. But everything was an instruction like this. Every even minor little detail of life, he would turn it into a very important lesson. I'll just share maybe two more. Also another time in Vrindavan, it was maybe my first time in Vrindavan, and I was staying with another sannyasi, and and I would go and see Srila Gurudev during the day. And one time he said to me, he said that it was Gunagrahi Das Goswami that I was staying with, and he said, Gunagrahi Goswami says that you're serving him very nicely. And I said, I said these words and I didn't mean to say more than I was saying, but when we both looked at each other, we knew that it conveyed something more. I said to him, well, Gunagrahi Goswami is very easily pleased. But when I said that, both he and I were looking eye to eye, and we both knew that there was an implication in what I said. That meant, yes, Gunagrahi Maharaj is very easy to please, but you are very difficult to please. Right? I didn't say it, but he thought it, and I thought it, and we're both looking at each other. And he's looking at me, and he could stare. Again, he didn't need words always. He could just look at you. He looked at me in the eyes. And he said to me, I am also very easy to please. You simply have to have the right disposition. That's what he said. I mean, he just left it there. But that there's so much in that instruction, right, about the disposition. Right? If you're worried about your own comfort, if you have the ego and you feel like you've been insulted when you get corrected, if you're serving the Guru with any other kind of motive other than the pure motive that you have a mission to serve Guru and Krishna, I simply want to help in any way that I can. I don't care about recognition. I don't care about, all I care about is serving. If you have that disposition, then he's easily pleased, right? It informed my entire life from that point on, that little instruction. But he was full of these instructions. They would manifest from him spontaneously. And the last thing I'll share is something that guides my life to this day. Is when he would stay in the Dallas temple, I would stay around the temple at that time. And he gave me some special blessing. That every morning during the japa period in the temple, he would sit in a certain place. And he would call me over and he'd have me sit next to him every day. And I would have the opportunity to chant japa next to him. And then towards the end, in the last 10 minutes or so, he would turn to me and begin to talk. And the talks always had a kind of a similar kind of theme, wherein he would begin to ask me about various things going on in the Hare Krishna movement around the globe. And he would ask me my opinion. What do you think about what so-and-so Maharaj is doing over there? What do you think about this project that these devotees have taken over here? But what I learned quickly is that he wasn't looking for some kind of stereotypical answer, like say, oh, Jai, Gurudev, it's wonderful. If I would say something like that, then he would begin to penetrate in why is it wonderful? You know, he didn't want to just hear some surface level kind of talk. He wanted to get into my head. And if my answer wasn't very thoughtful, if my answer wasn't very insightful, then he would pick it apart and just rip it into shreds right in front of me and make me feel like a complete idiot. So this was happening every day, and it made me begin to think about things in a different way. It made me begin to look at all the different kind of services and all the different projects and so on, and I had to think of them not on just the surface level. I had to think about them on a deeper level. What is special about them? What is unique about them? What may not be? What might be improved there? What might be well thought out? I didn't necessarily have to have the right answers, but I had to show that I was thinking. He forced me to think. He forced me to think deeper. And as the time went on, I began to realize he was doing surgery within my own brain. Through his questioning, he was teaching me how to think, which otherwise I may never have learned to do. So to this day, I carry that with me, and I remember that at the end of one of those days, he turned to me, and this is, again, is something that I'll never forget. He looked me in the eyes, and when he looked you in the eyes, you were riveted right there. And he said to me that in the United States right now, back in the 70s, we made so many devotees, and they would come to the temples, and they would fill the temples, and temples were very effective in reaching a Western audience. He said, today, the temples are no longer effective in that. And he said, how to reach a Western audience? Somebody is going to have to figure out how to do that. And he's looking at me in the eyes. And I'm realizing, he's calling upon me, he's calling upon us to be more thoughtful, to be more, to think more deeply about how to reach people. And then he shared one thing with me. He said, I don't know how it will be done, but I can tell you one thing, that it will have more to do with teaching than it will have to do with preaching. And that instruction stayed with me for the rest of my life. To this day, I try to learn from that and ponder that meaning of that and see how that can be applied. But he was so special. He entered the hearts of his disciples. He entered the hearts of those that he was dear to. He reached in and transformed them. Anything that I have to this day that I can offer to Krishna, whether it's my body, whether it's my words, whether it's my mind, whatever, in any way that I can make an offering to Krishna or to serve, I know it was very consciously and intentionally shaped by his presence, by his words, and by his example. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Vanchakalpatubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Wherever I don't see Kaustubha, but thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my particular relationship with Tamal and actually all my god brothers is pretty much as a Chotabai younger brother. When I joined in 75 in Europe, I was trained up in Sankirtan, book distribution. And Tamal was, like Kaustubha mentioned, as soon as you connected with the movement, you connected with Prabhupada, and inevitably you'd be very quickly connecting with Tamal, Krishna Maharaj, wherever you were in the world. His presence was so much pervasive in regard to his relation with Prabhupada, and how he was like Prabhupada's hitman, whatever Prabhupada wanted. But he was also, as Kaustubha mentioned, very well known for being, if you weren't capable of operating with his disposition, then you would inevitably experience how he couldn't enter into my heart. It was too much covered with a mountain of ahankar and so many multi-level coverings that I had to took decades to gradually, like a laser beam cutting through a mountain of rock, covering my soul. And Tamal, one time, it was like Indra with his lightning bolt. Right? He didn't enter my heart like he did with Kaustubha at his first meeting. He hit the mountain with his thunderbolt, and it took decades for me to be able to digest so I could become a fit disciple. Prabhupada. It was in Washington, D.C., Rath Yatra, on a hot day, and we were walking around
where Gouranga Maharaj later he would set up the Krishna Fest program outside the Air and Space Museum. It was around that area. And we were walking towards the capital. I was there with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he was there with his servant. And I got a hold of a stainless steel cup with water, so I could offer him some water. And he kept looking at me like, "What are you doing here? What are you doing?" Like, "Get away." But I was very attached to giving him that glass of water to do some kind of service, because he was like, I was just like a young kid, and he was like the hero of how you saw sannyasis, and especially him. And you just want to do something, And he just kept giving me the evil eye. Because he knew what I wasn't even conscious of. He knew. It took me decades to realize this. And then finally, he just grabbed the cup out of my hand and threw the water like that, and then thrust it back into my hand and left me stunned. And he kept walking. And I had to go through so many decades of purification to digest that lightning bolt on my mountain of rock covering my heart, and to realize his role so that we could go home back to Godhead and become a real disciple and understand what that means. And I can honestly say that whenever I hook up with Prabhupada and with him, because he's definitely going to be, and then I'm going to really relish getting whatever sauce he's prepared to give me now. And I'm really looking forward to getting tested in whatever way he sees fit. Anyway, all I can do is beg everyone, and beg Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj for in previous lifetimes having been such an offender that I had to go through so much rectificatory measures to straighten out a dog's tail. Prabhupada, he can do it. And he used persons like Tamal on his behalf. So I wouldn't have to go through all of that with Prabhupada directly. And for that, aside from all the other stuff that he was so much in the thick of to manifest the foundation of this, what this movement is today, how all of us, whether we're conscious of it or not, but eternally indebted to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And especially me. Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj, can you try?
This will be very short because I had very limited association with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. The first time I met him was in 1975 when I was in the Miami, Florida temple. Of course, by 1975 he was already an iskcon legend, and I was a very new devotee, Bhakta Mike. And I happened to be in the office of the temple president when Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I think also Vishnu Jan Swami were taking Mahaprasadam and having some high-level talks with the temple president in Miami and other senior devotees. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj looked at me standing in the corner and said to the temple president, he says, "You should watch this boy. He's listening to everything. He's very intelligent." So I think this is one of the qualities of an advanced devotee, is they can interact properly with all categories of devotees, even new devotees that they just briefly meet. It was an experience for me to have my existence acknowledged by such a senior devotee. Later, I joined the Radha Damodar party for a few weeks in Florida, and at a certain point it turned out that my book distribution results were totally unacceptable. So Tamal Krishna and Vishnu Jan Swamis had a particular way in which they dealt with devotees entering and leaving their party. One would take the role of what we call good cop, friendly, kind, merciful, and the other bad cop, the very strict and unforgiving type. And usually it was Vishnu Jan who played the good cop, and Tamal Krishna was the bad cop. But in my case, it was reversed. It was Vishnu Jan Swami who was very heavy with me and said, "Your results are unacceptable. You're going to have to go back to the temple that you came from." So I walked outside absorbing this, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj came up to me and put his arm around me and said, "In devotional service, sometimes we have our ups and downs. I've certainly had mine." And he was kind of encouraging me to go on in my devotional service, which I did. The next time I saw him was in Dallas, Texas. I was doing some of my science preaching at the time in Dallas. And one evening, a devotee came up to me and said, "Goswami wants to see you in his room." So I wondered, what's this all about? And I went to his room, and he greeted me very kindly, and he said, "Judakarma Prabhu, I want to ask you what I should do in the next phase of my devotional life." Because he had just gone through an operation, a very serious operation, and he was recovering from it. And he was in the middle of kind of transitioning from an ISKCON manager, GBC, very powerful manager, into his academic life. And he said, "I can manage in my sleep." That's not difficult for me. I can do that, but I want to do something else. And he began to talk to me about his plans for his academic life and asked my opinion.
I kind of take it as like Krishna taking advice from Uddhava. Didn't need the advice, he knows everything. So I think he knew very well what he wanted to do, but still he asked this lowly creature for advice. And the next time I saw him, the last time I had some personal dealings with him was in England. He was at Cambridge University, and I was doing some science preaching in England, and one devotee came up to me and said, "Tamal Krishna Goswami wants to see you in Cambridge tomorrow." So I went, and he again greeted me very kindly. And this goes to something one of the previous speakers talked about, his desire to get real feedback from devotees. So he had me join him for lunch, and he was very particular about the order that he took different foods in, so I asked him to instruct me, which, because a big thali was in front of me, and I didn't know what to take first. So he instructed me in that. And then he asked, I'm working on my PhD dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, and I'm wondering what advice that you have about that. And I said, well, what is it that you want to accomplish in writing this doctoral dissertation? And he said, I've asked several devotees this question, and no one has ever asked me what I wanted to accomplish, what I wanted to do. So that was my last exchange with him. This is short because I only had limited association with him, but the limited association I did have, I value very much, and I thank all of you for gathering here today in his honor. Hare Krishna, Tamal Krishna Maharaj ki jai.
Jai. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. When I come first time to India at 94, I was servant of my god brother, Rupa Raghunath. He was invalid on wheelchair, and I tried to help him. And Bhakti Brinda Govinda Maharaj invited us to his home in Vrindavan. And I helped Rupa Raghunath Prabhu to move to home of Bhakti Brinda Govinda Maharaj, and a servant come out from his home, and we tell to Rupa Raghunath Prabhu tell to him that we are here, and then come out from his home Bhakti Brinda Govinda Maharaj. After him, Shivaram Swami Maharaj, and after him, Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. And I remember the same very, very merciful and unkind and very deep glance like here on this picture. And this glance is very, very valuable. That's all. I don't have nothing more to say. I also can say that from Prabhupada Lilamrita I can understand that he is true disciple. Then Srila Prabhupada desires two persons, Srila Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Goswami, but one heart, completely. Previous speakers already mentioned that he was complete disciple. Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki jai.
I met Maharaj first time on Navadvip Parikrama in 1993. It was the year when he was chairman of GBC, and he gave an instruction to all the GBC to join Navadvip Parikrama. It was like all the members of the GBC, they joined Navadvip Parikrama. It was very ecstatic Parikrama. Few times I met him on Navadvip Parikrama on other years, and he was teaching us how to roll in the dust of Navadvip. He was showing himself and everybody was following him. It was like big event. Everybody was rolling in the dust of Navadvip. And also I heard a story from my spiritual master. It was in 1976 when Tamal Krishna Maharaj came here with a big group of his followers from Radha Damodar, and it was early morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and Srila Prabhupada called both of them, Gopal Krishna Maharaj and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, to his room, and they received instruction at the same time. So Srila Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, so now it's finally decided that you are going to China, and you, Gopal, you are going to Russia. So they have received this instruction on the same time in the same room from Srila Prabhupada. And I was present on the day when he left us. Of course, it was very memorable festival when he had these wonderful kirtans in his room. Everybody was trying to squeeze into the room because the room was not so big, but so many devotees, they wanted to participate in this kirtan, so the room was completely packed with devotees. And on that morning I was walking from my room for Mangalaratik, and he was leaving before Mangalaratik, and the Chinese devotees were bidding farewell with him. They were crying. He was leaving them, and after Mangalaratik the news came that he had this car accident, and Sridhar Maharaj was crying very much before the altar of Nrisimhadev. And also His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Maharaj told one story that before few days before he left the world, he had a dream with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj told him that please come back quickly, we have a special service. We would meet all devotees of iskcon who are coming back to Godhead. We would meet them and bring to Prabhupada. He told the story like this. So they have a very special service in the spiritual world. Here devotees are trying to help us to come back to Godhead, and they would meet us and engage us in the service. Hare Krishna. His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj ki Jai.